Welcome to this episode of Let's Be Civil. My guest today on Let's Be Civil is John Yzenas. John has been engaged in the materials and construction industry for over 40 years. His work is related to operations, quality, engineering services, and new product development. He is the past director of technical services for the Edward C. Levy Company and remains a consultant to the company. He is also an active member in many local and national organizations that deal with aggregate-related issues. Okay, welcome everybody to another edition of Let's Be Civil. Got another friend of mine, actually a former neighbor, basically, of mine. We were at a meeting together and discovered that we were living in the same small town in Indiana, in Valparaiso, Indiana. Which was kind of a surprise for each other, because we didn't expect to find out that somebody in this organization lived basically down the street. But John's with us today. Are you still living in Indiana? Are you still in the same old place, or?
Yes, I am. I live in Hobart, Indiana, which is probably about 10 miles west of Valparaiso.
Yep. So I'm not there anymore. We're just gonna have a casual conversation about your life and times, and you've mentioned to me that you've now officially retired. So maybe you can give us sort of the quick view of how did it all start for you, and how did you get to where you're now sitting at home? You mentioned you put your boat in the water, so life is now good, right?
Sure.
So give us a little synopsis of from start to finish for you.
Okay. Largely went to school down in South Florida, and my education is predominantly civil engineering with some business added at the very end as I went ahead as my career changed. Made the decision early on, I didn't want to sit in the office. And so went out in the field, got into the concrete industry. And that was really a decision that affected me throughout my career. My son recently graduated from Purdue in civil engineering, and I'm harassing him to get his PE. And I never went after the PE because I figured I didn't want to sit in the office and such. And by the time I realized it was probably of some value to me, it was pretty much late. I had forgotten most of what I learned in school and went in a different direction. So it was tough. Started out in the concrete industry, and that's what John and I have in common, being members of C9 and ASTM, and worked up in the southeastern Michigan area, was in the industry up there for about 10 years with a company by the name of Coleman Corporation. And we were a relatively large family-owned ready-mix operation. Advanced up to the point of being a plant manager, and then made some decisions of changing jobs, stayed in the industry, and then essentially went to W.R. Grace. And in working with W.R. Grace, stayed in with the concrete, but had an opportunity. They were opening up an engineering services group and had the choice of making the transition into that group. And I had a boss at that point in time says, you won't like it. You're going to be talking to engineers. There's no reward to it. And I had another gentleman that was trying to get me in and basically convinced me, no, you're not making sales. You're not seeing dollars, but you're promoting ideas and you're transferring knowledge and such. Right. And probably at that point in time, started working with engineers. And I've been working with engineers for almost 40 years now.
So talk a little bit. So how many different jobs have you held over your career where, something So not like consulting jobs, but, you know, full-time employment.
Really, probably only about 5.
Okay.
A
Only.
couple, yeah, well, a couple of ready mix companies. I transitioned through 2 ready mix companies, one of them being Coleman Corporation and the other one being Martin Industries in Lansing, Michigan, where I was general manager of the operation. And did that. Then I did a short interim because the Martin Industries one was an interesting one. I was actually hired to close the business.
Mm,
And so they were doing some transitions in the family, and it again was family owned. So I worked myself out of a job on that
right.
one. And I did a transition of another ready mix company in between, the WR Grace.
Mm,
Was with Grace for a while, probably about 8, 9 years, and had an offer one day to come to work for Edward C. Levy Company,
yeah,
which is the company I retired from.
right.
And I was with Edward C. Levy Company for 35 years.
So,
So
so 2 things here that I think could be interesting. First is, and you know, if you want to speak to any one particular transition or you know, to them as a group, how did you decide that it was the right time to make a change, or you know, to even make a change? You know, what was your process for saying, I think I'm ready to move to, you know, a different opportunity?
I think to some extent, the early ones were probably more financial and advancement wise. The change from Coolman Corp to Martin was from being a plant manager to being a general manager of an operation that had ready mix, block, aggregate, had the whole can of worms in there,
Right.
and overseeing it. Needless to say, along with that came, you know, financial benefits and so
Right.
forth.
Right.
Um, the WR Grace one was an interesting one because it was still within the field that I was in, but initially it actually ended up being a stopgap measure of, okay, I had finished working at Martin's, where am I going next? And Grace had been calling on us and, you know, said, would you like to come to work for us? And figured, okay. And, you know, I think really with no intentions of staying there long term, it was, hey, it's a job, it's putting food on the table.
Right. Right.
The one with Levy, that it's a personal joke with me and my wife. We turned around, they offered me the job with Levy, and it was previously somebody I had worked with that was heading up the group. And it was one of these things, it took my wife probably about 30 seconds to make up her mind that we were taking the job. It took me 30 days. And the joke behind it was we were moving back into her hometown, Hobart.
Oh, okay.
Exactly
Okay.
where we're at
Okay.
now. So
Okay.
she moved home and she was ready. And this one had a lot of challenges because it started out, you know, where you and I got together. I was asked if I would like to head up their technical group.
Right.
And, you know, the joy of working with WR Grace, I was involved in the early stages of the microsilica concrete. We were doing a lot of work with engineers, writing specifications for parking garages and bridges and so forth. And that's really where my education came into play.
Right.
Of
Right.
now having the familiarity with that. I had joined CSI a long time ago, so was familiar with specifications, writing specifications,
Sure.
and yeah, got into it and just absolutely loved it right from there.
So some of it, you know, some financial reward, which is, you know, nothing wrong with that. But it sounds like as your career went on, it wasn't about the money. It was about the job. It was about other things than the money.
I absolutely love what I did and what I'm still doing to some extent. You know, like you and I had talked previously, albeit I am retired, I am doing some consulting work and such, and I'm still quasi-active as far as the industry is concerned. But I always enjoyed the aspect of having new things in front of me, going in new directions, and that's what this job really offered me. The stuff that you and I had got involved in as far as sulfur contents and testing and such as that.
Right. 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 Yeah,
For,
different. Go ahead.
yeah, for all the civil engineering students that are going through, required to take 2 semesters of chemistry. I absolutely hated chemistry. I finished the last semester of chemistry. I got my C. I was getting out of there. The books went in the trash can as I walked out of the lab. Thank God I never have to do this again. Just to bring everybody up to date, for probably the past 25 years, one of my major projects and where I got to know John is one of my sections was a chem lab. When I finally retired, we had, I think, 9 people working in the lab. And of the 9 people working in the lab, 5 of them were chemists. So
they come back to haunt you.
Yeah, never throw away your books. You might need them somewhere down the line.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, you really don't know where your career is going to take you. I mean, and particularly with a background in civil engineering, it's so varied. There's so many things, and the fact of the matter is the general public is really not aware of all of the different opportunities that open up if you have a civil engineering degree and the kind of work you could be doing.
I specialized in materials on mine instead of going into truly the engineering side.
Right.
So looking at material properties, that's where the chemistries come in. My biggest complaint about the education system at times is that the civil engineering education really doesn't spend a lot of time teaching you about the materials that you're using. Right. Learning more about the concrete, learning about asphalt, and learning about the other physical properties and chemical properties and how they affect. We're currently doing X-ray diffraction, X-ray fluorescence,
some
spectrometers, all the way through looking at the physical properties and how do they relate to the performance of materials. And unfortunately in school, if you have a chance to take an extra materials class or an advanced materials class, grab it. It is definitely worthwhile.
Yeah. And a lot of the stuff, regardless of the subdiscipline you're in, you have some element of what you do is going to involve the materials. You're going to be building something or managing or something, maintaining some kind of an asset, and you're going to need to know about the material characteristics. Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing you'd mentioned, which is unusual, so I'd like you to if you don't mind, delving into this a little deeper. Working to close down a business. That's got to be a rarity, that there are not that many people out there who were part of the process of doing something like that. So being unique, tell us what did you do? What's that like?
It was really an interesting circumstance, in that had walked into a situation where it was a family-owned company. The father owned the company and was looking at ultimately transitioning and restructuring the business in order to go ahead and hand it off to his sons and daughter, who would eventually run the company. And what our situation was, the company was not badly in the hole, but they were slightly in the hole. So what we ended up having to do is come back and get the company moving to the point where it was back and profitable, and it was black. And once it was profitable, now he could go ahead and close the doors and make the transition and do a very clean cut and transfer the company into his children's hands and go from there. So one of my favorite things of that job was, as we moved down the line, of having our auditor come up and say, "Hey, John, we're black."
Right.
And me making the phone call to the owner and saying, "Hey, we're black." And he says, "Well, how quickly can we start shutting down?" And I said, "You're going to have to give me a couple of weeks on this, because we have customers that we're going to have to inform, and we have to go through the transitions. We can't just shut the doors." And so we did that transition. And the really neat part about it is that was 35 years ago or so. And at this point in time, company's still there, kids still got it going.
Oh, good.
And, you know, so it worked exactly the way he wanted it and the way the family wanted it to go ahead and move it forward. We just helped with the transition.
Sure.
Why I say we shut the business down, really for all intents and purposes, worked at making the business profitable so that we can get everything all closed up and make it a neat package to set it down.
Right. So did they, just out of curiosity, did they maintain the same name and sort of the branding, that all of that just stay the same so that people who were customers didn't really realize or wouldn't notice any major change? Or
they maintained the same name, but there was some contractual things that ended up having to take place. So there was probably about a 2-year transition of the company doing that transfer, coming over. And in doing that, to the best of my knowledge, the company still has the family name on it and still ended up going in that direction. The overall business model changed a bit in doing that. So there was a lot of the customers, we were doing a lot of commercial work and such. And now, I won't say now, at that point, their transition was more into private work, into a smaller portion of the sector.
Gotcha.
So, yeah. And I think they've built from there. As I said, you know, they're still there chugging along 30 years later.
Right.
So,
yeah. Hopefully, sorry. Hopefully they're in the black, right?
Yeah, hopefully they are. I'd have to say they probably are, because they're still there. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you have any other interesting stories over your career that would kind of rival that one, would be in that same league? Because that's a pretty interesting story.
Yeah, nothing other. You and I had touched base with the engineering services with Grace. A lot of people tried to talk me out of going into Grace's engineering services group, for no other reason than you're working with engineers, you're working with specifications. There's no reward.
Yeah.
And these were people mostly on the sales side. They're looking at the dollars and cents portion of the business and everything.
Yeah.
And I always thought it was interesting in being able to work on new projects. So engineering services really lured me. Yeah. And I think what people don't realize is the reward coming from doing specifications, and doing specifications that are long-term, that they're good, solid specifications with backup. It is so nice to be going by, and why I may have never touched the building, I can say that's my building because I wrote the spec for the concrete.
Right.
And knowing that, you know, the building's still standing and still going forward. Troubleshooting. Coming down into Indiana, they had a pavement problem at one point in time, and it was an asphalt problem. My background at that point in time was concrete. You know, the major portion I know about asphalt is it's black. And we ended up with that. We went down, looked at the situation, and we started doing some cores on the asphalt pavement. And we took the cores and sent the cores back to CTL in Chicago to have their petrographer take a good look at them for me, and went back to the state's engineer and basically provided him with the information he needed so he knew where his problem was. And one of the questions he had was, why did you do cores and petrography on this? I said, because it's something I'm familiar with. And I said, with concrete, we always do cores. We always look at the petrography to resolve the issues. And I said, you can do it with asphalt too. You can look at the surfaces. You could look at bond, everything else. And I said, you know, nobody had done it at that point in time. He thought that was the most interesting thing. And that was my start in asphalt. Since then, you know, I've probably got 30 years in the asphalt industry. I'm in D4 also. I'm past chair at D4, which is road and paving materials and asphalt. So, yeah.
So I think I have to give you a little bit of a hard time, because you said at the start you didn't want a career behind a desk. And I would say that you ended your career behind a desk. Is that a fair assessment?
Kind of, yeah. It ended up, it was kind of a 50-50 deal, because I still did a lot of field work. We were very involved with doing lightweight deflectometers. And so I was actually out in the field doing measurements and such. Firm believer as I went along of not having my people do things that I haven't done myself.
Sure.
And that way I keep my hand in by going out in the field. And when somebody comes to me with something, I actually have been there, done that,
Right,
and
right.
can provide some insight along
Right.
those lines. So
Right.
yeah, I probably spent more time in the office than I really would want to be in a new position, but on an overall basis, I still spend at least half the time in the field or traveling. Edward C. Levy is international, and I've had the joy with them. I've been all over the world and have seen construction projects and different laboratories and universities. And so, you know, do I have an administrative type job? The answer is yes, but exactly what we're doing with computers nowadays, I can sit in New Delhi and have the same conversation
Right. Yep.
and go through the same things, yet in the meantime, watching how they build roads in India.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So what was it to think back to, you know, you graduating, and you seem pretty strong in your feeling that you did not want to be the consulting, you know, civil engineer, be in an office. You wanted to be outside. What were the things that influenced your wanting to have that kind of career, at least at the start?
While I was going to school, I worked in the construction industry.
Okay.
And so I worked outside all the time. And that's where I was really comfortable. Had the horrible scenario of working construction in South Florida. So I was outside a lot. It was always warm. There was a fair amount of sunshine and everything. It was really horrible being down there, you know. And so I really enjoyed that. And
Right.
I wanted to continue that as far as going forward,
Right.
and wanted to have that ability. So
Right.
that was probably the major factor in starting out in the construction side.
So this, you know, how much did you have conversations with your classmates about, you know, initial career paths? Because I don't know if this is an accurate statement or not, but, you know, people, I think, look at civil engineers and expect them to be consultants, you know, and if you're in the field, you're more coming out of a construction program than you are a civil engineering program. You know, today, I don't know how much that might still be the case. But like, were you kind of alone in your, you know, wanting to be out in the field decision, or?
Yeah, I didn't have, I guess, what I'll call the normal college education or university education of, you know, being in class, live with a group. The fraternities were not a discussion and such. I worked my way through school, and I paid for my own schooling and such. So, you know, I went from working an 8-hour day to grabbing a couple classes at night. So my interaction on an overall basis with fellow students was relatively minor. You know, I probably knew more people outside of school relating to my work than I knew, you know, from classmates. Knew a couple of the professors and such, was close to them, but as far as the actual students, nah. But when class was over, I was going home to get as much homework done as I could, go to sleep, and get up for work the next morning.
Gotcha.
So,
Gotcha.
you know, I was the true one. It actually took me almost 6 years to go through school, but I never pulled 14 credit hours. I was the guy that was pulling 9, maybe 11.
Just enough.
Just enough to keep it going, and financially and time-wise. So.
Gotcha. So that decision, you really didn't have anybody commenting on why they were, you know, going down the path that they were. I just was kind of curious as to what were the external influences that sort of helped you make that decision about, you know, going into a field job. But if you're already in a field job and you're comfortable in one, it makes total sense that you would want to continue down that path and just employ this, you know, new knowledge that you would have.
And for me, it was nothing other than moving up another level or
Level.
moving to the next level in the line of work that I was
Right.
doing.
Right, right. So you were in the very southern states and you ended up in the very northern states. So talk a little bit about just how life is different, you know, because that's another element of, you know, people's careers. And sometimes they make choices for a job that takes them to a different part of the country and they don't really realize, you know, that depending on where you live, life is different, you know, even in the US.
Yeah, it's really a seasonal thing. The big thing down in Florida, working construction, especially outside construction, uh, you know, the old joke with wearing the work boots and the cut off shorts and no shirt, that's, hey, well, welcome to our world. And we joked around coming up here. My dad always gave me a hard time about it. And that moving up north is, why do you want to go up north with the winter and all this? And really enjoy the 4 seasons. But the other side of it is going back to the cutoff shorts and work boots. He always complained, it gets cold up there. And I said, Dad, if it gets cold up here, I can always put on another layer of clothes.
Right.
Put on another layer of clothes, another jacket.
Right.
Unfortunately, by law, you're down in South Florida, there's only so much you can take off. So I said, I'll put the clothes on. Yeah. And it is a different scenario. It's a different set of guidelines. Different materials are different. You know, do a lot with aggregates and rocks and such in our analysis, and just totally different materials up here. A little bit broader spectrum of what gets done. So, you know, I guess it's really a matter of preference with climates. I've enjoyed the Midwest since I've come up. I've essentially Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan, you know, are the areas that I've been located in and have got to travel outside. So it's weather. I like 4 seasons.
Right, right. The other thing that I think is you're in a position to comment on is like size of cities. So as you're making decisions, maybe talk a little bit about as you changed, you know, those 5 jobs and you moved around. I mean, Hobart, Valpo, what's the population of Hobart? You know, 10?
I think Hobart's probably in the middle 20s.
Okay. You know, right. I mean, it's not what, and
Yeah.
I forget Valpo, I mean,
Maybe 30s.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, so I mean, and this is a very small town, you know, on a national scale. And there's a job there.
Yeah.
And a job that you really liked, right? I mean, you know.
The neat part is we're 60 miles outside of downtown, out of Chicago.
Yep.
Yeah. In an hour, I could be at O'Hare.
Right.
And if I make it to O'Hare, I can go anywhere in the world.
Right.
And, you know, that's really been the scenario while I live in the Northwest Indiana area. I end up, as I said, I've traveled all over the world. I've got more frequent flyer miles and stuff than I ever would imagine having. Was close enough to the big city to be involved. We still do a lot with Chicago, with the big cities. You don't have to be in it. Modern technology has taken you to the point you can do a lot of stuff on the computer sitting on the desk and nobody has absolutely any idea where you're at.
Yeah.
Talking to the head of materials for the state of Ohio, answering a question for him. And he says, well, where are you? And I said, I'm in Sydney, Australia. And, you know, oh, okay, well, and I said, hey, you called, you left a message.
Right.
I returned your call.
Right.
And yeah, new technology allows you to be anywhere.
Right.
And I think that's really one of the joys that I've seen the transition through the years is take advantage of the technology. It really opens up your world.
So if you look over my shoulder, and it might be hard to see, but so my thumb, there's the Packers, and then I got to go this way, Badgers, Brewers. So, you know, that'll tell you where, but even with that, my most favorite city in of any that I've been to is Chicago. You know, people kind of giggle and laugh, but if I were to retire today, I'd be looking for, I know the building, and I've said it to people, I know what building in Chicago I want to live in. What, I just don't know what floor. I have to look at which floor, you know, the condo is going to be in, but I know which building. So
Yeah. I've got the other side. I absolutely love New York and Chicago. Wouldn't want to live in either one.
really,
I like it where I'm at. If I want to have dinner in Chicago, if I
Yeah.
want to go to Michigan Avenue and go
Yeah.
shopping, I
Yeah.
can be there in an hour.
yeah, yeah.
You know, or I could hop a train.
Well, now I
and-
want to live in Chicago, but without a car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
you don't want a car in Chicago.
right, right. I'll just get around, you know, subway system
Yeah.
and those sorts of things. So, well, sir, it's been a pleasure getting back in touch with you because we haven't seen each other for a little while. But I've enjoyed the conversation tremendously. I'll tell you, when I have the opportunity to go to Chicago for any event, I go because there are the places to eat, you know, just like you said, go to have dinner. So maybe next time I'm headed that way, I'll give you a call and we can meet up in Chicago and go out to dinner someplace. And
Sounds good, John. Look
continue the
forward to
conversation.
it.
Yep. So I want to thank you for being another one of the guests on our Let's Be Civil podcast. And I hope you have a great day.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. You take care.
Yep. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.